Today's class is going to cover a lot of topics. I called it the biblical roots of the Arab-Israeli conflict, which is really an inciting topic. Wow. There are millions of people in Facebook land who are now dying of curiosity. All right, so let's try to understand. So we're going to go on. We're up to, actually, when we cover today, we'll see a lot of this issue. So the last thing we got up to last time was the end of the covenant that God gave to Abraham, where he said he was going to have a child, and that child was going to inherit the land of Israel. And God made the covenant with Abraham that his children would be the chosen people, and that they'd go down to Egypt, and they'd come out, with wealth, and they would rebuild, and they'd go to the land of Israel, and he would have a child. Okay, so that was the covenant. Now, the problem is that after the covenant, they still didn't have any children. So, you have a question in life. You have to make your effort. So what do? They weren't having children. So at a certain point, Sarai, who's going to be called Sarah afterwards, Avram's wife. So she said to Abraham, I'm on page 70, they were living 10 years now in the land of Israel. And when she saw she didn't have a kid for 10 years in the land of Israel, that was a sign. She felt that she's not able to have children, because maybe beforehand they weren't in the Holy Land and that prevented it. Now they went to the land of Israel. They were there 10 years, didn't have children. She said that she can't have kids. And the truth is she was right. I mean, the Midrashim say she really was completely barren, which is why this story is going to be more incredible when she has a child. But she really was barren. And she should not have had children. There was no natural way that could happen. So after 10 years, she said to Abraham, and this is something that was commonly done in those days. Not commonly done, but it's something that we see in the Torah was done. The Bible was done at certain times. When a woman couldn't have children, sometimes the husband would take another wife and have children with their second wife. And that was really, biblically, polygamy was permitted. In Jewish law, it was frowned upon. It was not the normal situation. It was frowned upon. It was said that a couple should be just husband and wife, and they should not have more than one wife. There were certain circumstances, according to some of the Talmudic scholars, that needed permission from the wife that to have that. One of the cases that would happen was if the woman couldn't give birth, and they wanted to have children. And they didn't know how to do that. So what happened was she had a handmaiden whose name was Hagar. And so what Sarah tells to Abraham, her name is Sarai now, to Avram, she says, I want you to take my handmaiden, and instead of her being just a handmaiden, I want you to make her your wife, and I want you to have relations with her, and we'll have a child through her, and I'll help raise this child. And that's like she's having a child, because it's like, it was her handmaiden, and she's having the child, and she'll raise the child. So that was Sarah's idea, which is a very, you could just imagine it's like a really sort of selfless idea. It's the idea of like, wow, I'm willing to do this, I'm going to have the child. What is the rationale? Is it that the merit of this somehow will give her a child? Is it that she's going to raise the child? We know whoever raised the child, that they gave birth to a child. The roots of adoption, why adoption is a kind thing to do, because like you raise a child, like you gave birth to a child. Which one was the rationale? That's a longer discussion. But that's what she suggested to do. Now, who is this Hagar person? Who is this handmaiden? This handmaiden was not just a regular nobody. She was actually a very special person. She was an Egyptian princess. And when Sarah and Avram were in Egypt, and then if you remember the story that Pharaoh took Sarai, and then all these miracles happened where he couldn't get close to her, and he having all these problems, and he realized there's something fishy going on here, and then she calls Avram and says, hey, this is your wife, and he kicks him out. So when he sees the miracles that happens through this woman, Sarai, he's like blown away, and his family's blown away, and what happens is he basically gives one of his princess daughters, and she wants to go to be a handmaiden to Avram and Sarai, was better for her than being a princess in Egypt. So that's a very significant person because, she left royalty to like say, wow, these are holy people and these things are happening for them. I want to be involved with this. Okay? So that's who Sarai is. I'm sorry, Hagar. That's who Hagar is. So Hagar, Sarai says to Avram, I want you to be with Hagar and have the child if I can't have children. Okay. So Hagar goes. Now, you got to get the dynamic here because Hagar is the handmaiden of Sarah. She goes and she's with Abraham and she gets pregnant right away. At that point, her whole vision of the world changes. And she starts telling people, Sarai's a phony. She acts like she's so righteous. She's really not. And I can prove it to you. She, all these years with Abraham, she couldn't get pregnant. Right away, get pregnant with Abraham. And all of a sudden, there became a problem with the balance between Sarai and her handmaiden Hagar. And now Hagar felt herself from being the handmaiden, she was now the main matriarch, and Sarai was inferior to her.
And she was raised as a princess.
She was raised as a princess, yeah. So this is like a whole wild dynamic. So she starts saying about Sarah that she's a phony. Now Sarah gets angry at Avram. Avram, what did you do? Chamasi alecha. My anger is on you because you're at fault in this. Because when God spoke to you in that covenant and you said, you're gonna give me a lot of reward, but I have no children. What's it worth? So you prayed for yourself, but you didn't pray for me also. Because you didn't say, we don't have children. And now God answered, you have children, I don't have children. So she felt that Abraham had done her wrong. And she got angry. And she said to Abraham, furthermore, you see the way Hagar is acting towards me right now, and you don't say anything. Abraham says, you're right. Okay. Here, take your handmaiden and do what you want. And now Sarah does something that is, I don't know, good, bad, it's strange, but she says, Vaya now. She started making her work really hard. She started like saying, you're under my thumb. Now, Nachmanides said that was wrong. Said to do too much, because we're going to see who the descendants of Hagar is going to be. But according to Nachmanides, that was a mistake. That the great Sarah had to put her in her place, but she did too much, even though she was so righteous. Again, I want you to understand this. When we talk about the patriarchs and matriarchs, they're the holiest, greatest people in the world. And every slightest mistake is considered to be a major, major mistake. So, you decide you're the boss, you got demoted, now you got to show you're the boss, but you still got to be, gentle, and it's because she was too much. And so, Nachmanides, we're going to see, says that was a problem, and the future of Hagar's descendants and Sarah's descendants have a little issue because of that. And he says that Sarah crossed the line a little bit. All right. So she goes now. One thing happened before that was she lost that child. She miscarried. That child was lost. And at a certain point, it doesn't say how fast, but when she realized that she's under Sarah's thumb, she ran away. Okay. She lost the child. She ran away. And then what happens is she goes to this place, and all of a sudden she has a spiritual vision, which was shocking to her because she did somehow in the house of Abraham and Sarah, she saw these spiritual forces. It's what's called malachim, but she didn't think she'd see him now. And then a spiritual force actually communicated with her. Okay, and the spiritual force says on page 70, he said to her, the angel says, where are you running from? Where are you going? So I'm running from my what do you call it? Mistress? What do you call it? Is that the right word? My mistress, Sarai. And now in verse 9, it says, Vayomer lamalach Hashem, the angel of Hashem said to her, Shuvi el gvirtech, return to your mistress, and subjugate yourself to her. Okay, so the angel is actually setting up the parameters of this relationship. Yes, go back. I know it's rough. Go back and make yourself secondary. Give Sarah her place as being the prime woman in this house. That's what you got to do. That's the right thing to do. And now he says something very amazing. The angel says to her, Yinei hara v'yalad ben. You'll get pregnant and you're going to have a child. And you'll call this child Yishmael. Because Hashem has heard your suffering, and you'll have a child. This child, Yishmael, what will be his nature? Says the verse in 12. I'm going to translate it now. I'll read the Hebrew. You'll follow the English, but there's a lot of translations. These words and what exactly was the future of Yishmael, this child that's going to come out through Hagar, is a very big discussion. Every word here is very meaningful. Hu yepera adam. He'll be a wild man. Be very wild. Yado bakol. He'll have his hand on everybody. Okay? V'yad kolbo. And everyone's hand will be on him. Either meaning conflict, strife, battles, or he'll have his hand, everyone will have the hand, everyone will need him. He'll have some things that people will need him. Their hands will be like, hey, which may be called oil. Found some oil there. And he'll fall on the face of his own brother, whatever that means exactly. Now, this was the promise that's going to happen to the child that is going to be the child of Hagar, whose name is Yishmael, who actually is none other than the father of the Arab nation. Okay? This is exactly what's happening here. So the father of the Arab nation, he is the one who's going to be Yado Bakol. He's got his hand in everyone. Everyone needs him still. They have his hand back in him. He's wild, and he's a certain power source that's going to be contentious, and that's people are going to need him. And it does sound quite a bit like the situation in the world today. Fascinating thing. That was what the angel said to Sarah. And really, it comes from different aspects. I mean, the Pera Adam, the two components of, and this is a very fascinating thought, she was from Egypt. And Egypt was a licentious place. Egypt was a place that was considered wild in a certain sense. Abraham's quality was he was a believer. He was a maimon. And that combination produced the Arab nation, who have strong sense of beliefs and may do things that maybe are outside the realm of what we would say that people should be doing. And they do it in a lot of sense, in a certain sense of a power of belief, if you understand what that means. You know, if you believe something is right, you just say, okay, I'm going to do these things. That's a powerful combination and a somewhat of a dangerous combination. A person to be a believer and yet to be, not have the boundaries of certain parameters. That's what's happening right now. And that's the promise that the Bible, the Torah tells us, is going to happen to Hagar, her child. Okay. Now, fine. So Vatel Hagar, she gives birth to the child. Abraham names the child Yishmael, which is fascinating because it doesn't seem that Hagar even told Abraham that this was the name, the angel. But Abraham on his own figured out Hashem's answered my prayers, and he calls the child Yishmael. Okay, that is the first component. Yeah.
I just on page 71, line 11, where it says, an explanation for Hashem has heard your prayer, like, why should you call him Ishmael? Like, it doesn't seem that Hagar anywhere actually prayed for anything in that paragraph, right? Did she? I don't know if I missed that.
Well, for the English translation is not so good here. Hashem has heard your suffering. It didn't mean she prayed. We don't see she prayed. There's also another issue which is a very fascinating thing that the Medrash says, written thousands of years ago, that's referring to the Jewish people. The Jewish people will call to Hashem from the troubles that are happening during this time, and Hashem will hear our prayers, because we are having, a unfortunate relationship with our cousins, the Arabs. So the Medrash says that this is going to be talking about God hearing the call of the Jewish people, because Yishmael is going to pressure the Jewish people later on in history. And Nachmanides says one of the reasons that happened, one of the reasons, there's numerous we'll see later, was because Sarah pressed too hard. That's very fascinating. Very fascinating. So, and we'll see the other reasons, which are really very powerful in the interaction, the relationship right now.
On verse 10, can you, the English translation seems a little confusing to me. Can you maybe translate that for us?
Verse
Not,
10.
I don't think it goes with thunder. I don't know.
Verse 10, V'yomer la malach Hashem harber zarech. I will multiply your children. There'll be so many that you won't be able to count them. I mean, the Arab nation is gigantic.
Okay.
They really, I mean, even without whatever deeper meanings there are, but that's obviously happened. I mean, you have very large, people came out of Hagar from that. Now, again, there's no discussion, but there are people that are born of Arab descent, and there are people who have taken, like the Iranians, have taken on the religion of the Arab people, but they're not actually Arabs. And that's another discussion, a very, very deep discussion in terms of that. We've talked about it many times in terms of what's going to happen in terms of the future, where the Talmud says that the nation that you need to be careful about in the future, who is the one who will initiate, wars at the end of history, are the Iranians, is Paras, Persia. And one of the explanations is because it says there's a combination between the West and the Arab nation, and that's going to precede these wars. And the great Maharal says that's referring, and the Talmud says is referring to Persia, who they themselves are a combination, because they are actually call themselves Aryans in terms of who they are, but they took the religion of Ishmael. So they are themselves like a combination, which is why, yes, what's going on right now with the Iranians is a very, very real thing. The Talmud's, I mean, again, if I say the Talmud recorded this thousands of years ago, this is that the one who is going to start these wars in the end, that is going to be, very, very serious, leading on times of Mashiach, so the revelation of the Messiah, Mashiach, will be Persia, which is Iran. And it says it right there. It's amazing. And you see it. And this is why, to go and say here some nuclear weapons is not the smartest thing to do. Okay? Good. Now, let's keep going. So now, time passes. All right? So Avraham was an old man when Yishmael was born. Okay, people lived older, but he was an old man. He was 86 years old. It's old. Even in those days, it's not so young. All right, so now in chapter 17, Avraham, 13 years has passed. Avraham now is really an old man. Talmud says when a person hits 100, he's called over a bottle. He's just like, he's out of it. I don't know if you ever met anyone who's over 100. And I've met some great people because of the great sages. A lot of times when they're like 80, they're called like youngsters. I think they're 90. It's like the great sages. I mean, my Rosh Yeshiva passed away when he was 106, 105. Yeshiva also 106. Sometimes the great sages, they can live very old. But you see that it's changed when they hit 100. It's like they had. I told you a story of Yashuv, who was 106, passed away at 106. He was one of the leading sages in the past generation. My brother was there. So my brother's doctor is a friend who's a doctor, and he was in the room when they were doing a CAT scan on this great rabbi's brain when he was 106. And his health was failing, and the doctor came in, and my brother's friend who was a doctor was in the room when he heard this. He came in dumbfounded. The doctor came in, I don't understand this. I've done this CAT scan of his brain, and this is the brain of a 16-year-old. There's absolutely no atrophy in his brain. This person is completely, people who are 30, 40 already, there's something, you haven't been using your brain. It's 106 years old, and his brain is like functioning like in its prime. Is it blown away? But still, when you hit 100, you're called Avra Bata. It's like kind of you go to Florida, right? And when you see the people drive in Florida, the guy's like, hey, I'm 85, I can do what I want to do, I'm driving, I'm not even looking, I'm just going, because I'm old enough. Or people are 80, they say things to you sometimes like, my mother-in-law show him, she used to say that, he's like, say what I want to say now. It's like, I don't care. 100 years old, you're like out of the world. Abraham is 99 years old, and God appears to him in a vision, and he says to him, listen, go before me and be pure. And now he tells him that he has to get a bris milah, circumcision. Okay, this is where the circumcision comes in, that's commanded to the Jewish people, because he wasn't circumcised. That was not done in those days. And when Abraham gets circumcised, it's going to flip the world out. Remember, Abraham's style was, he kept his tent open on 4 sides. Everyone come on in, and you're welcome. And, and people felt it was a very universal type of approach. Now it got a little bit scary. What's he going to ask me to do? Before he wanted me to bless. Now, I don't know, it's coming in. So the circumcision kind of now moved Abraham from being the universalist to being a much more isolationist. And that's why Abraham, it's a big challenge for him. He's he's reaching out to the whole world. And now all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm different. But God tells him to do it at the age of 99. And he says, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. So God tells him to become pure before him and to circumcise. And now he says, I'll put my covenant between you. And now God says to him, your name is changed. Your name before was Avram. Avram means you're the father, the Av of Aram. You're the father of this place called Aram, which is a place in Syria that he lived, and you're like the leader and the father. But now your name's Avraham. Abraham stands for Av Hamon Goyim. It's a phrase that's an acronym for you are the father of many nations now. Abraham is going to become the father of many nations. We'll see the Jewish nation, the Arab nation, the Western world. We'll see he's the father of many nations. But also he's a spiritual father of many nations. When a person converts, they're called their child of Abraham and Sarah. So Abraham is now, with this circumcision, he's going to become the man. He is the one who changes the whole world. So I'm changing your name, Abraham, from Avram to Avraham. And now what's going to happen is I am going to give you a son, another child. Okay? Okay, and I'm going to give him the land of Canaan. Okay, and if you turn the page here, page 74, God changes Sarai's name to Sarah. Sarai means my princess, my officer. Sarah means the distinguished one for the whole world. She's going to be the world figure now. Okay? And now he says like this, in verse 15 and 16, Berachti Osa, I bless her, and I'm going to give from Sarah to you a child. Okay? And
this happened in 99?
99. Wow. 99. Now, Abraham, it says in verse 17, he says he falls on his face and he laughs. And he says to himself, can I give birth? I'm 100 years old. She's 90 years old. How can this be? But he believes God. But but now in verse 18, he says something that's very, very strange. And it's going to change the course of history for a certain degree. It says in verse 18, and Abraham said to God, Lu Yishmael Yechel Fnecha. I wish that Yishmael, my other son, would live before you and be righteous. Now, this was a prayer that Abraham gave for the Arab nation, who his son Yishmael was that son. And he loved Yishmael. And Abraham now is concerned. He's concerned, wait a minute. First of all, he's thinking, well, if I have another son, then is that going to push Yishmael away? So he says also, am I worthy of this kind of miracle? They give me a child now. It would be for me, as long as Yishmael would be righteous and holy, okay, he could be my descendant. Now that's really where he kind of affected history a lot. This prayer for Yishmael was very, very powerful that Abraham gave at this point. Okay? Now, God responds to him. He says, okay, listen. No, you don't understand. Sarah is going to give birth to a child, and you're going to call him Yitzchak. Okay? And as far as Yishmael, I heard you. In verse 20, I heard you. I will bless him, and he'll have many, many, it'll be a big nation too. But the covenant that I'm setting up with you to be your descendants that are going to be the chosen people who have the land of Israel, that Espriti Akim Es Yitzchak, that covenant will be only through Yitzchak, which will give birth to you. Sarah will give birth to you in this time in the future. That's the prophecy. Whoa. So now we see there's a real interesting dynamic here where Sarah had this handmaiden, Egyptian princess. She gets pregnant. She feels she's above. The angel says, go back and subjugate. She gets pregnant again. She lost the first child. She gets pregnant. The child is called Yishmael. 13 years later, God promises Abraham will have his own son from Sarah. He changes Abraham and Sarah's name. And Abraham is very joyful. At the same time, he has tremendous love for his son Yishmael, and he's concerned how Yishmael is going to affect. And this he puts a prayer that is going to give. There's certain things that do give Yishmael a certain connection to the land of Israel right now, which is part of the challenges we're having. One of them is, as we're going to see in a second, is that when God says to Abraham to circumcise his family, Yishmael agrees to it. Yishmael is 13 years old, so he could have said no, but he agrees to it. Now that is going to create a certain merit that Yishmael had, because those who have a connection to the Holy Land have to be circumcised, and that's going to give Yishmael this issue now of the battle and the contention of whose land is it, which we'll see in a few moments. Yeah.
I was just wondering, when Hagar went with them, was her status like, did she accept the God of Abraham?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
she was like a...
Yeah, she was. I mean, she was a handmaiden, so she didn't. But she was, yes, she was at that point, keeping the things and part of this revolution that Avram and Sarah were. And we don't see at that point, if Sarah took her and said, be with her, and says she took her with nice words and says, you're going to be not connected to the tzaddik, to the righteous person. So she really obviously thought that Hagar had a lot going for her and that she was worthy to be with Abraham. But Hagar is in a bind in a certain sense, because she's has to subjugate herself to Sarah, and now she's starting to feel that she's the one on top. And we're going to see that really, by the way, I'm trying not to be too political. I'm trying to tell you what it says here in the Torah, but that is a very, very deep part, as we'll see in a moment, really what is part of the Arab-Israeli issue, and I will explain that from a spiritual, political situation. Yeah.
So, the promise had already been made that he was going to have all these descendants. And then it also said here, though, too, that he was going to beget 12 princes and make him into a great nation.
Right.
So, and the other thing, so Ishmael went ahead and was circumcised as well. So was it his 13th birthday, or was he already older?
It was 13. It was 13. That's why Arabs circumcise kids when they're 13.
Well, I was just wondering if it was his birthday or not when he did it, or if he was already 13.
I don't know. But that's why the Arabs have customs to circumcise themselves at 13. The commandment here, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I know all Arabs still do it there, and I know in Israel many of them do. I think that's still the Arab custom, but it's fascinating because you literally see it from the parsha here. You see that Yishmael is 13, and when God tells Abraham he has a child, he says to circumcise him at 8 days old. And that's the Jewish custom of what the commandment was. Okay? Now, there's a question if Yishmael, his descendants, are obligated to be circumcised. Avram's going to have more kids later, which is strange because he was old, but he had more kids later, which we'll discuss. Those people, they are actually obligated to have circumcision. Yishmael, the question was he obligated or not? Because God said that to the kids that are going to be born to you, Yishmael was already born. No discussion, but Yishmael agreed to have circumcision. I said could be the other children of Abraham are actually obligated to be circumcised. Yishmael agreed to it. Okay, now, and he's 13 years old. Now, Abraham and you know what? What I'm going to do now is how much time I got? What time is it now? About 8:33. All right. All right. I'm gonna. Okay. I'm not 10. That's fine. All right. 43. 43. All right. Decision time, because I want to connect this thing. All right, I'm gonna go fast here, even though this is a very deep thing. But I want to connect it to the part you need to know about the story of Yishmael and Abraham. So I may go back on it, but I'm gonna do this quickly now to get to the other part. Abraham circumcises himself. Okay, fine. Now, what happens is he's sitting by his tent. It's a third day of circumcision, and Abraham loves to bring in guests. That's what he does. But Hashem doesn't want Abraham to have to worry about bringing guests in. You know, he just got circumcised. You know, you're kind of turn 100. You know, take care of yourself right now. So that Hashem made it very, very hot. So nobody was traveling. But Abraham felt so bad, he wanted guests, that he was just sitting there like looking for guests. You know, even though. So Hashem sent 3 guests. But these guests, now the question how he understands was a vision, there is one commentary, Nachman, I think it's Maimonides, says this was a vision, but we're gonna learn this straightforward from the text, that the people that came were really angels who somehow appeared in some type of form that Abraham was able to see. And he didn't know that they were angels. And he saw these 3 people, and he said to them, oh, come else. And he brings them food. And he sends Yishmael to go and to catch get this egel, this calf. And the calf runs away, and that's how they find the calf. Actually, runs into what's called the cave of the Patriarchs, where they buried Abraham, and he realized that's where Adam was buried. The whole story. But they have these guests, and the guests come in, and the guests eat, and they're really angels, and there are 3 of them, and they each had a different function. And there's a spiritual rule why angels have different functions, because angels. The word angel, I hate saying it in English because it has a bad connotation. It's the word malach. Malach is the word malacha. Malacha is the spiritual rule. And every spiritual rule does one thing. Gravity does one thing. Gravity is not electromagnetic. It's different. It's a different world. So every spiritual has a certain thing. So there was an angel, a spiritual rule that was in charge of named Raphael, which is from the word healing, was to help heal Abraham. There's another malach called Michael, right? In English we say Michael, Michael. And Michael, he was the one who was telling Abraham and Sarah the news about the child. Sarah had not heard it yet. Abraham heard it, but Sarah had not heard it. And then the other one was called Gabriel in English. And Gabriel is from the word gevura, strength. That's called the judgments in the mystical writing, and he was going to be continuing down to Sodom, to destroy when the city of Sodom is going to be destroyed. So these 3 angels come, and they tell Abraham, they say, "Where's Sarah?" So Sarah's over there, and they say, "Listen, you should know, we're going to come back in a year. and Sarah's going to have a child. Now, Sarah laughs at that. And Hashem says to Avram, why'd Sarah laugh? And Avram says, Sarah, why'd you laugh? And she said, I didn't laugh. He says, no, you laugh. God told me you laugh. Now, it's a very weird discussion. Yeah, I mean, this is the great Sarah. She's denying she laughed when she laughed. What's all going on here? Well, so the answer is, it's a very obvious question that I would start with. Imagine you're 90 years old. They don't know they're angels. 3 Arabs come along, 3 traveling Arabs come along, traveling nomads, whatever you want to call them. There's no Arab nation yet, but traveling nomads come along, and tell a 90-year-old woman you're going to have a child. I'd laugh too. Wouldn't you laugh? What's wrong with laughing? So I don't say like why shouldn't she laugh, and then why'd she deny she laughed? You hear the question? So the answer, I believe, is one answer like this: is that when a person sometimes laughs, they laugh because they think something is like absurd. It's not possible. So when Sarah laughed, she laughed thinking this is absurd. Now, she didn't think she was doing something wrong because she said, these 3 guys tell me, it's funny. So when Abraham says, why'd you laugh? You can have a child. I wasn't laughing at the possibility. I was laughing because who said it's going to happen? And of course, if I knew there were angels, I would believe that. I believe it's to be true. So Abraham said, no, but there was a place in you where you shouldn't have laughed because the laughing demonstrated that you really kind of didn't believe this was going to happen. And maybe that was the fault. You didn't God was perform a miracle for you in this level. Okay? So Sarah's laughing was somewhat problematic. But I got to tell you something here. Sarah is laughing. Titzchak, she laughed. Abraham, when God first told him, he laughed in his heart. Everyone's cracking up. Everyone's having a good old time with this. So, but the difference is Abraham's laughter is different. Abraham's laughter is like, yes, I'm so happy. Sarah's laughter, she thinks it's happiness, but or she thinks it's just that silly that they said that. But there's a place where God said, no, there was a place in your heart where you should have believed that I could make this happen. All right, but they're laughing. And then Hashem says to them, call the child Yitzchak. What does Yitzchak mean? It means laughter. Now, Isaac means laughter. Now, but this is a little bit silly. I want to show you why. Here you got the 2 people in the world who are like the revolutionaries changing the whole universe, right? Starting this revolution. People think, oh, they're going to die. They have no child. And all of a sudden, a miracle happens. 190, they have a child. It's outrageous. It's the craziest thing you ever heard in your life. What do you name this child? Like the ultimate. the one. Neo, the one. What are you going to name him? No, you name him Joke. Yitzchak. Crack up. You name your kid Laughter. What kind of name is that? Joke Boy. You call him Joke Boy? Joker. What kind of, call it? I mean, this is too important. What does it mean? So there's a lot of explanations why he's called Yitzchak. But I want to explain one thing to you. The reason, one of the means, laugh is a very deep thing. We say in the one of the prayers in Eshes Chayil, we sing that the woman of valor laughs in the last day, her day of death. She laughs. Now, that's kind of a weird time to start laughing. But like she's singing, watching an old Seinfeld, you're going, that's good. I don't understand. Why did you laugh when you're just dying? And let me explain to you why. When a person, how is laughter produced? Laughter is produced by a great contrast, right? A good punchline is you think it's going one way, and then it's exactly opposite, right? When you see I remember one time I had this guy. He was a fairly pompous guy, and he was talking to me this and that, and then he got up and he wanted to show he was in charge. He started walking out the door, but he didn't realize that the glass was closed because someone had just cleaned it. It looked really good, and like he just banged into the to the glass. And I didn't want to laugh but it was just so funny because the contrast of the pompousness and then walking into a glass door is like it makes people laugh. The contrast. When a person thinks that they're going to die and they realize they're eternal, There's nothing funnier than that. That's what the Eish Chal laughs on her last day. Because what she says is that, like, no, this is like death to you. This is life. The world is starting now. So laughter on the last day, that's what it represents. It represents the idea that what looks like demise is the beginning. Yitzchak is called laughter because he's the ultimate laughter. Even the word Yitzchak, if you flip the letters around, it spells, the Kabbalah spells the words Ketzchai. Yitzchak, the letters spell the word Ketzchai, which means end of life. End of life. It literally spells just flip the letters around. Because why? Because the end of life for Yitzchak is where the laughter starts. Because I begin. Abraham's 100 years old. I tell you, 100 years old means you're out of this world. You're gone. God definitely, specifically wanted to make it. The Jewish people started when it was impossible. The Jewish people's existence is not possible. It makes no sense. Okay, they have that case of people who were anti-Semites. I forgot who it was, Dostoevsky, or I forgot who it was exactly. But I forgot exactly what happened. But the Russian Tsar asked, I think it was, I forgot who it was. He asked, says, "Prove me there's a God." He says the Jews. Why? Because according to history, they should not be able to exist. Nothing makes sense. It doesn't make sense. There was a guy, a Jewish cadet in West Point, who went to complain one time, why don't we study any of the Israeli wars? He said, I thought it was anti-Semitic. Why you don't study? You study all these wars, you don't study any of the Israeli wars. So you know what they told him? They said, we can't. Because they make no sense. You shouldn't have won any of the wars. We can't explain it logically. It's miraculous. It doesn't make sense. It's the Jewish people start where it's impossible. Isaac, Yitzchak, laughter is born when Abraham and Sarah finished. It's the end. It's the last day. It's finished. And that's when it starts. The whole history, the whole existence is supernatural. That's the laughter. Now, I'm going to skip the next parts. We'll catch up later, but I do want to tie it now to what we started with. Eventually, after this promise, a year later, Yitzchak is born. Okay? Is born. And what happens is they make a party for him. Not right away, but they make a party for him. He got mail. The question: what was the party? When was it exactly? It could be it was after he was 2 years old, when they were weaning the child. Okay. And what happened was at that point, Sarah saw Yishmael starting to go off and act in inappropriate ways. We'll just skip that a second. So we're going to skip a second and we'll have to explain it here. Look here on page 96. Okay, they made a party. The question is how old he was here. Different explanations exactly what it was. But she sees in verse 96, Sarah saw the son of Hagar, Egyptian, who she had born to Abraham, mocking. Okay, Mitzachek, they saw him like not acting properly. And Sarah says to Abraham, chase this Amma, chase my handmaiden and her son, because he's not going to inherit with my son Yitzchak. Okay? She saw him doing things. She saw him not acting properly. She saw him doing things to hurt Yitzchak, saying, I'm only kidding. And she saw him starting to go off and not acting appropriately. And at this point, Yishmael, who was righteous, started to go off of the path and not act righteous. And she says to Avram, you gotta send him out. He's trying to hurt Isaac, and he's going to be a bad influence. And Avram is very disturbed by this. But Hashem says to Avram, yes, she's prophetically right. You need to send them out. And she sends out Yishmael. Now, this is a sort of a watershed of what's happening here. This is a demarcation point. Yishmael goes out and he wanders and he starts acting in various ways, this and that. eventually, Yishmael, it says, the Talmud says he repents before he dies. And how do we know that? Because when you read in the text later on about when they come to bury Abraham, it says that he was buried by his children, Isaac, Yitzchak, and Yishmael. And the sages say, wait a minute, Yishmael was pushing himself as being the boss always. And he would say, I'm the one. And now he said that Isaac was first. That's a sign that it shows us, that with our tradition, that Yishmael repented before he died. But the dynamic that was happening when he got kicked out was the same dynamic that we saw back with Hagar and Sarah. The problem was who is the chosen people? Who is the son of Abraham that's going to be the one to be the main source of this service? That's what Hagar was upset about. She says, I'm the real matriarch, not you. And that was the first break. And that was the same break that Yishmael had with Isaac. He says, I'm the real one. And we'll see later on. He said, I circumcised at 13. And you're nothing. And that was the point, the battle between Isaac and Yishmael, between the Jewish people and the descendants of Yishmael, of the Arab nation. Yishmael, we said, repented, that he recognized the role of Isaac, and he accepted it. And when he accepted it, that was called that he did tshuva. But that really is what's going on right now. And that's just now getting a political moment, but that's really what's happening in Israel. What's happening is that there are some Muslim scholars who quote the Quran that say that the Jewish people were supposed to get the land of Israel. There's a verse like that in the Quran. The Quran does not mention Jerusalem at all, right? It mentions Mecca 700 times, Medina 350 times. It mentions it all the time. It doesn't mention Jerusalem at all. So what was the need to make Jerusalem that place? And I know there are different traditions in Muslim theology, Islamic theology here, but the Midrash tells us something very interesting. Midrash says that in the future, the Arab nation will put their holy spot, a holy spot, on our holy spot. For us, the Temple Mount is the spot. That's the space where Abraham offered Isaac as an offering. That's the place where Jacob had the dream of the ladder. That's where the world started from. That for us is the point of the Temple Mount. That is the place. And Medrash says in the future, the Arab nation will put a holy place of their own there, instead of saying that belongs to the Jews. Why do they do that? So it says they do that because they want to get in between us and God, like between a husband and a wife. That's our spot, and that is not comfortable for the Arab nation. The Arab nation has a place where they say, wait a minute, who is the chosen one? And what is this relationship? And that literally is the dynamic here. The dynamic is that saying, okay, so the land of Israel should belong to us, right? The Arab nation says no, that's not what it says. And even according to some Arab scholars, even the Quran seems to say according to some. Okay, but the point is that was the source of contention. The contention was, who is the descendant of Abraham who has to be the chosen people to bring this mission? And that's why it's not an accident now that the intifadas we're talking about do center around the Temple Mount. That's not an accident. It's not an accident. If you think it's an accident, you're not watching close enough. Because there was intifada, about the Temple Mount. No, it's because that's the discussion. I mean, I hate to say it, but that is the discussion. It's not the political ramifications are the issue in the spiritual root of it. Who is the son of Abraham? Who in Islamic theology, the claim is that Yishmael was brought as the offering, not Isaac. Well,